Ladies and gentlemen, this is a report that was done by Press TV. And me, I prefer foreign news over American news any day. One thing I like about foreign news, whenever they interview people, no matter what the race of the person, they don't try to control what that person says. That person can pretty much speak their mind and say what they want, and they don't try to rush them along and cut them off like they do on American news. They want to control everything you think, everything you say. Hell, even the trolls on YouTube try to do that. But this is why I like the foreign news, because it's more thorough, more detailed, and they let the people talk. And I like that. I'm going to get into Press TV, police brutality in the US, and what do Americans think, and just listen to all the different opinions that they get just from doing a random question of people walking past on the street.
Have the American law enforcement agencies got a problem with race? US police have been under the spotlight for fatal shootings and brutality against African Americans. And the figures speak for themselves. A disproportionate number are killed or imprisoned compared to the white population. And about a quarter of those who died were diagnosed with a mental illness. However, repeatedly, police officers involved in such killings are acquitted of charges. Is the American justice system racist? And is the treatment of police officers who have killed people fair? Simple questions with important answers. Let's start with this. Do the police in the US have a violence problem, and why? We asked the American public.
Not necessarily violence, but to me, the police in itself exercise violence, and sometimes in excess.
I believe the problem with the police just reflects the general militarization of society as a whole.
Do I think they have a problem with violence? Well, yes, I think they have a problem with violence because it's their job to have a problem with violence. When violence presents itself, they have to react.
I think they have a problem with not understanding the way to conduct policing. That's the problem. More training.
Definitely. I think they do have a issue with violence. I can't understand why, but I would say more or less it's the violence that's being portrayed in our communities and with the government itself and the law system.
I think that's a big problem because, I don't see the reason why you would kill someone just because of the color of their skin if you don't have like an issue in your head.
I think some police have a problem with violence. I don't believe that most do, and I don't know why the ones that do have a problem.
It's quite obvious that the police in US Satan have a problem with violence. They go around killing people on a massive scale. It can't be accidental. They shoot people, beat people to death, suffocate people by sitting on them, battering them with the new style weapons. They find all kinds of ways of mutilating and beating people. Why do they do it? Because they're part of a culture of violence. US Satan was built on violence. It's the only nation in the world to be built on the basis of a double genocide. And apparently they're proud of it. They used to make films about it, about how they call it winning the West, committing a genocide against the American Indians. They're less silent, well, they're a bit more silent about their role in the enslavement and the genocide that they carried out against African people.
There's definitely a problem with violence and the police in US society. People have been telling you this for centuries. It's only recently now that there's been camera phones and it's being broadcast in real time that the world is really starting to see what it is for what it is, right? Since Africans are taken this, forcibly all the way through slavery, Civil War and emancipation, Black Power, Civil Rights Movement, the war on drugs, right? Black people, especially men and women, right? Children, right? Have been murdered by the police. They took a different form in the past as people, slave captures and everything else. But all the way through, there's been this violence against particularly African people of African origin, but poor people in general, right? In the US, but it's specifically targeted at Africans, because of the historical significance of them in that society.
The American police have been under increasing scrutiny in recent years because of the disproportionate number of African Americans being killed. Are there racial inequalities in the American criminal justice system, and why? Here's what the American public told us.
Yes, because the police does not equally represent everybody. African Americans are not equally represented in the police department.
Yeah, I do, but I feel like they put it out there and look for it to happen when sometimes things just happen and it's not necessarily because someone's a certain race.
It's true there's discrimination by police, but it's also just becoming more in social media, more awareness. It's always been the case against Blacks and other minorities, but now people aren't being able to get away with it quite as easily without, the recognition.
I do think we need, better improvements in our police department, and like I said, build better relationships. It's just I feel like there's just hatred, between there's no, great relationships. So I guess that's my answer to that there. I think there is racism in different places and different pockets of the United States. I don't know exactly why. That's a historical question and not easily answered, and not a soundbite type of question. Do I think it is increased in time? No, I don't think it's increased in time.
I think there is racial inequalities, but most importantly, it has to do with the training of the police and really understanding different cultures, more so of education.
There definitely is racial inequality. And the reason I say that is because, for example, if me and my white friends were to walk around and then one of us, something happens and we start running, who do you think the police will most likely chase, right? They'll chase me because I look black and I might look like the suspect. So for that reason, I think there's definitely some biasness in the criminal justice.
Possibly some, but I don't know for sure.
Statistically, I don't know how that plays out. I know there are issues and that Blacks look at it one way and other people look at it a different way. So I don't have a good answer for that one.
There are most definitely racial inequalities in the US Satan, the so-called justice system. It's a criminal injustice system, actually. And its purpose is to be unjust. And it comes from an environment of injustice. The two major injustices are the genocide against the American Indians and the genocide against the African people. So there can be absolutely no doubt whatsoever that the US Satan Police Department, which is the internal army of US Satan, it can be no doubt that it's based on injustice.
There's, it's unquestionable that there's inequalities in the justice system because it's been very well documented recently that after slavery ended in the US, African Americans were targeted, and in order to, it's a massive chunk of their economy that was then, taken away or transformed, right? And in order to get that workforce back, certain measures were taken by those in power to turn those people who were once slaves into criminals, right? To particularly and deliberately target African Americans as criminals, right? In order to put them into the prison system, into the criminal justice system, in order to continue slave labor. We see with the prison industrial complex, right? Former plantations today are prisons with the same demographic of people working those fields in chains as they would have been during slavery. So that's the very nature of the criminal justice system in the UK, in the US.
What does the American public think about NFL players taking a knee during the national anthem in protest against police brutality? And does the public feel the players are justified in protesting in this way?
Yes, they're justified in protesting this way because the government has taken it to extents that it's not supposed to be. They were doing it for a reason, and it had nothing to do with the flag or the anthem or anything like that. It was just justified.
I mean, I don't think it's anybody's business what they do. If they want to do it, if it makes them happy, it's not really hurting anybody, so why not?
Honestly, my personal opinion, what I think they're doing is very disrespectful just because the men and women who died in this, served this nation, it's just very disrespectful to take a knee. And I think, in my opinion, you should stand up for the national anthem. But the Constitution does guarantee the First Amendment speech, and they have a right to kneel, in the protest, as long as, at the NFL, their bosses tell them that they have to stand, and then that's when I think they have to.
First of all, I can't speak for the NFL players and why they're doing it, but I think that it is an issue that is equally divisive as it is respectful.
Taking the knee is justified. Very much so. You take a knee, any type of protest, you are allowed to do that. So if you want to take a knee and it's during the pledge or the Star Spangled Banner, you can do that. There's nothing wrong with that. Now the NFL and the association have to deal with that. If they feel like that's the problem with that, then they have to deal with that, and the football players have to attack back and figure out a solution to their problem.
I'm not sure if they're really protesting, but if they're protesting, that's amazing because they should take a stance. I feel like it's wrong.
If they feel like they should kneel to protest, that's all right. I don't think that they should be condemned for it, because most people who say that it's a bad thing that they're kneeling, they're saying they are disrespecting the army. But if you think about it, the army is out there fighting, people getting killed so that we can have these rights to protest. So like if they feel like they should protest to bring awareness to the injustices, I think that's all right. Yeah.
I think they should honor our country by acknowledging the flag.
The country or the Constitution, gives Americans the right to protest.
I want to take my hat off to the NFL players who are making a stand. It's about time people who are wealthy made a stand on issues of justice. There's an obvious wrong in the behavior of the police towards African people and other poor people in US Satan. The rate of murder is just too great. And so I want to compliment them. They're absolutely justified in making the stand that they've made. And going down on a knee, which is what they did, is not much of a stand. It's symbolic in some ways. It's not much of a stand. But we have to compliment them for the little that they're doing.
Of course it's justified. I mean, for anyone to protest against the murder of your people, is something that should be a standard and should be celebrated, especially by that community. If the oppressor or the community of the oppressor don't want to accept, that's a different thing, right? But for anyone to say that they want justice or they want equality or they want anything like that to try and condemn these people who are using a platform that they've earned, if you're a professional athlete on that scale, you've earned the right to be in that position. And so for them to protest whatever they feel like, especially something as important as this, like I said, which is it's a historically important, vitally important part of American society, global society, really. You know what I mean? These people are saying this is wrong, and they're taking the opportunity to do that. They should be supported, right? And the backlash is kind of typical of a society that doesn't want to see those things change.
According to the Washington Post, in 2016, US police officers fatally shot nearly 1,000 people. That's 3 deaths a day. African Americans make up about 10% of the US population, but account for 40% of prisoners in America. The United States makes up 5% of the world's prison population.
President Donald Trump is being criticized for encouraging police brutality. He said police should not be too nice to criminals. What does the American public make of Trump's attitude towards the police?
his attitude towards the police. I believe he incites more violence, and he's not a uniter, he's a divider.
I mean, that's his opinion. If he wants to feel that way, like, I'm not a criminal, so just if you do anything illegal, just expect to get in trouble for it.
I just believe as a person, he's encouraging more polarity and violence, without any particular justification for it, just because that's his personality to enrage people.
Because I don't know what he said specifically on that. But that's all I got to say on that one. Yeah.
I think Donald Trump is as much of the problem in inflaming the issue as he is solving it. I think as in terms of leadership, you look for symbols. I think he's a poor symbol for the United States to solve any progressive movement towards the solving of any type of racism anywhere in the world, but especially in the United States.
It just depends. Like, if you're a criminal, if you committed a crime, if you're out here robbing a bank, hey, the police have a right to do what they have to do. But if you're a citizen and you're protesting and you're out here to, just speak out and have a voice, then nothing is wrong with that. The police should not do anything to people who are protesting. Not at all.
I don't think I agree with him, but I don't know for sure.
I'm not in favor of being nice to criminals either. The issue to me is to determine who is a criminal and who is not. And it seems like sometimes the police do jump to conclusions wrongly.
Well, Trump gives the impression that the police are in the right and the so-called criminals are in the wrong. The truth of the matter is that the US Satan police are the criminals. They are protecting the criminal system. They are protecting the criminality of the American Indians' land. They are protecting the criminality, which is the subjugation of African people. And so what you have are the criminals in uniform attacking the innocent, the American Indians, the Africans, and generally the poor people of US Satan, on behalf of the rich thieves who have stolen that territory. We must always remember that US Satan is a settler colony, a stolen land.
It's kind of typical of Trump, typical of American presidents throughout history, and typical of an oppressor talking against an oppressed people. So again, you have to always look at history, and the fact is that police in most Western societies, America is no different, are there to protect those who have from those who don't have. And so as someone who is clearly a member of the, national, I don't like to use the word elite, but, the upper echelons of that society, and he's a billionaire, he was born a millionaire at least. His attitude is that the police are there to protect his assets and his people against those people who might take it from him. And so it's kind of normal, The thing is, he might have taken it into a more extreme way of thinking now because of the politics that have got him into power and the people who he's aiming that way of thinking at,
Frequently, after killings by the police, officers are acquitted and face very light consequences. What does the American public think about this, and what should be done?
Violence exists, yes, from the police department. And I believe it should be curbed in a way where everyone is treated equally. Every neighborhood, every person, regardless of the race, your religion, your creed, anything, everybody should be treated equally.
Well, the criminal system is still under a lot of inequalities because of the way that it's basically a mercenary commercial system. And I believe one solution would be to have an actual justice system that was not related to the exchange of money, but rather to the actual incident itself. And right now it's a commercial court, so it depends on who has lawyers and who has backing and all that stuff. That is a lot about money rather than about what the actual event that happened.
I think that's one of the things we can improve on. Obviously, if a police officer does, do a wrong thing, he should, honestly be terminated. But I think we need better, better community police, better schooling, better training. I think,
I think that until people hear the facts of any one case, it's very difficult to opine from the outside as to what that case or the results of the outcome of that case should be.
If you are police and if you do shoot someone and if there is a commotion about it, then you should no longer be a police officer and you should go to jail. No matter if it's for 6 months, no matter if it's for a year, you still should go to jail just because they have to prove to the people of this country that the judicial system does work. And by letting police officers off and by them getting a not guilty verdict, then that just proves to everybody else that the judicial system is corrupt and it's not working.
It's unfair, and I feel like they abuse their power. So if they're committing crimes and killing people for no reason, I feel like they should be incriminated just as a normal person would if they didn't have the power.
I think they should be fired. Like, if any police has mental, because I feel like racism is a mental issue. Like, there's no way you can just hate someone because they look a certain way. So, like, for police who intentionally go after African Americans just because of the color of their skin, I think they should be fired and look for treatment, because honestly, it's a sickness that you can hate people to the point that you want to kill them just because they look a certain way.
I don't have an opinion on that. I don't really know any details.
Yeah, the lightness of the consequences that the police in US Satan face for just out and out murder is consistent with the way that murder has been condoned by US Satan. When they invaded the lands, they murdered the American Indians, and this was condoned. It wasn't even condoned. They were heroes. They won the West. That's the kind of language that they used when they murdered the American Indians. When they committed genocide against the Africans, this was perfectly acceptable. This was something good. The lynching of Africans was something good. And so it is that if the lynching can continue, and if you have a police uniform on whilst you're doing the lynching, that you're carrying out the work of US Satan. And of course, what is needed in order to change that is US Satan must be the subject of revolution. We have to have a situation where the people rise up and take back their land. It is the land of the American Indians, and it's for them to make the appropriate decisions for that land.
So this isn't something that only happens in the US. It's something that we have to deal with a lot here as well, right? And as far as my research has gone, since the beginning of since the middle of the 20th century, there has only been one police officer who's been charged with the murder of someone, and that was right at the beginning, right? Since that happened, the laws were changed in order to protect them, right? And again, this is something that is kind of normal when there is a situation where police hold a specific role within society to protect those who have from those who don't have, and when they do commit these murders, the police investigate themselves, right? For even the Independent Police Commission is made up of former police officers, or at least they're part of the same criminal justice system. So they're going to protect their own, right? As far as what needs to be done about it is that they need to go to jail. And so, if they murder somebody, they need to go to jail, and there needs to be consequences to these actions. I don't really see that happening unless we as a people change that, because, like I say, the system that we have functions in the way that it's supposed to function. So,
from Martin Luther King in the 1960s to the present day, civil rights activists have highlighted the discrimination which seems to be built into the American justice system. But even decades after calls for equality became a national political issue, the inequalities in the justice system seem to continue.
The American police are repeatedly accused of violence towards the black population in a disproportionate fashion. Civil rights campaigners say it, the media reports it, and the statistics prove it. But nothing changes. Can America overcome a racial bias in its justice system? If the statistics are anything to go by, currently the answer seems to be no.
right, ladies and gentlemen. See what I mean? You see how whenever the press and foreign news ask a question, they always let the person complete their answer. In American news, if they don't like what you're saying, they start shouting on top of you, talking on top of you, cutting you off mid-sentence. You notice how they don't do that. That's why I prefer foreign news over American news any day. They don't do any of those things. They always sensationalize everything. They're biased. They always want to put on some performance when they're talking to somebody. In many cases, these journalists, or what you call reporters, or whatever the hell they are in America, they're egotistical, and it shows. They're arrogant. You don't see all of that in foreign news interviews. That's what I really like. But please tell me what you think. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And don't forget to hit on that notification bell. And please join me over on Black Junction TV. Peace, family.